Today, we're wrapping up our Imago Day series about forming healthy relationships in the context of a diverse community, specifically a faith community like ours, which is made up of people from different identities, life experiences, and beliefs. We've been exploring some ways that we can honor that diversity while also cultivating unity. Last week, we talked about empathy, the practice of considering things from the perspective of another person and feeling their emotions with them. This practice is useful for fostering understanding between people and improving communication and relationships, especially when the people involved are different from one another. Empathy is something we see taught in Scripture and modeled by Jesus. Empathy is just the first step in cultivating healthy communities. The next step is compassion. Where empathy seeks to understand, compassion is moved by that understanding into action. Compassion sees the pain and suffering of another person and takes action to alleviate that suffering. So today we're going to talk about the importance of showing up for one another and how to do so while avoiding burnout. In the early days of the church, Christians had to figure out how to live together and do ministry alongside one another. The book of Acts recounts the way that the apostles' preaching led to thousands of people responding and committing to following Jesus. And it wasn't just one type of person that was following Jesus. The early church was made up of people from different social statuses, ages, nationalities, genders, and more. Christianity was radical in this way because it was one of the few places where all these different types of people mixed and interacted. And not only were they in relationship with each other, they were considered equals in a way they weren't outside of Christianity. You can imagine how difficult it must have been to navigate all the different and new dynamics while also establishing a new religious tradition that was still trying to find its footing. It's hard enough to manage in 2025, and we've had a couple of thousands of years to figure it out. Somehow, those early Christians found a way to come together that worked for them. Let's read the description of their community in Acts 2:42 through 47. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Awe came upon everyone because many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. The writer of Acts paints a beautiful picture of the early church. They were brought together by their faith in Jesus, but what really bound them together was their relationships and the ways they showed up for each other. They gathered around tables to share meals and discuss their faith and their lives. They made sure that everyone had their basic needs met, even going so far as to sell their possessions to make it happen. Their way of living and their faith got people's attention, and their community grew every day. This passage in Acts is often lifted up by Christian teachers as the ideal we need to return to. It's so easy to take it in isolation and assume that the early church had it all figured out. But as the story in Acts continues, we learn that the community didn't always get it right. There were power struggles and prejudices among Christians. There were times when they had more people in need than they had resources to meet those needs. They were persecuted by both the Roman government and people of other religions, and those are just the challenges that the writer documented. I imagine they also had all of the smaller day-to-day disagreements that happen anytime you get a group of people together. The important thing is that they worked through their issues and continued to show up for each other in good times and in bad. They formed deep relationships that were able to withstand disagreements because of their baseline belief that all people are children of God. We are living in different times and circumstances than the early Christians, but I think we're facing some of the same challenges they probably faced. As the Imago Day team members and I discussed ideas for this series, one of the recurring themes in our conversations was that it feels like our culture has forgotten how to care about other people. Instead of approaching each other with empathy and curiosity, we draw our battle lines in the sand. It's confusing, frustrating, and heartbreaking, especially when some of the loudest voices of hate are coming from people who identify as Christians. Like the church in Acts, we have an opportunity to be countercultural and to break this current cycle we seem to be stuck in. Like I said earlier, it starts with empathy, and then we take that empathy and turn it into action. So how do we show up for people in 2025? How do we show compassion to people we know and people we may never meet? We could easily spend multiple sermons on this, but I'm just going to offer a few ways to begin. When it comes to people you know, start by offering your presence. Literally show up for them, getting to know them and spending quality time with them. Make space in your life to nurture relationships beyond your immediate family or partner. Those relationships are important and deserve to be nurtured as well, but there are relationships outside of those circles that can be just as meaningful and life-giving if we're willing to intentionally make time for people. There will be times when both we and the people we love experience a crisis or just the everyday difficulties of life. Death, divorce, depression, cancer, job loss, and more. Instead of pulling away from each other because it's messy or awkward or we don't know what to say, we can return to that practice of presence, of showing up anyway to laugh, to cry, to sit in silence, to do the dishes or cook a meal, to watch a child or help find a doctor, to send an encouraging text or a stupid meme. It doesn't have to be revolutionary. Compassion is just as much in the small, mundane acts. When it comes to showing up for people we don't know, we should start with listening. Listen to what they are going through. Learn about their experiences and the systems contributing to their pain. Listen to the people who know what they or their community needs and follow their lead. Don't assume you have all the answers and be okay with making mistakes or getting it wrong sometimes. Part of the work of compassion is the willingness to apologize and take accountability. As you listen, find points of connection, ways that you can provide support or fill a need. Maybe you don't have time to volunteer, but you can donate some money. Maybe you can't offer financial assistance, but you can show up and volunteer. Think about your life, the people you know, your job and your skills, and how those might allow you to help. For example, I have a friend who works in marketing, and every year he chooses a local nonprofit to donate his services to for free or reduced prices, helping them tell their stories and reach more people. I have another friend who's a professor, and she volunteers her time in local women's prisons to help the women get their education. I know someone who cares a lot about the LGBTQ+ community and often opens her home to queer people who've been rejected by their families, serving as a mother figure. I could keep going, but I hope you're starting to get the point. There is no one-size-fits-all way to show compassion, to put that empathy you're feeling into action. Compassion thrives on creativity and imagination, on a willingness to say yes. Our congregation has shown me this time and time again that we have big hearts and willing hands. Whenever something happens in the world or even right here in our own community, our staff gets inundated with calls, texts, and emails from you all asking how you can help and what we need. Let's not lose sight of that, especially when current cultural narratives are telling us who is worthy of compassion and who we shouldn't care about at all. So now here we are. We're empathizing. We're showing compassion. We're fired up and feeling great about our ability to do good and make change. But as time goes on, all that empathy and compassion can get overwhelming and exhausting. After all, there's a new disaster, a new story of injustice, another person in pain every day and everywhere. We're trying to stay informed. We're trying to do the right things and help, but it's starting to be too much. And suddenly we find ourselves stuck or numb or just plain old depressed and anxiety-ridden. This is the part of engaging in the work of compassion that we don't always talk about because it makes us feel guilty or embarrassed or like a bad Christian. And it has a name: compassion fatigue. Psychology Today offers this definition of compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue refers to the experience of any empathetic individual who is acutely conscious of societal needs but feels helpless to solve them. People who actively engage in charity or volunteering may come to feel that they cannot commit any more energy, time, or money to the plight of others because they feel overwhelmed or paralyzed by pleas for support, and that the world's challenges are never ending. Sound familiar? I think it's safe to say that we've all experienced compassion fatigue at some point in our lives, probably even multiple times. It's that feeling of exhaustion and even dread when we think about the news. That numbness that comes when we've been providing care or support for other people. That lack of motivation to keep fighting against injustice because what's the point? It's not like anything is ever going to change. Experiencing moments or even seasons of compassion fatigue can cause us to feel guilty or weak. Instead of beating ourselves up over a perfectly normal feeling, we should take it as an opportunity to step back and listen to our bodies and our souls. The work of compassion is ongoing. There will never be a moment when we arrive and all the world's problems are solved. As artist and writer Danielle Koch Balfour puts it, there will always be work to do, and the work will continue on with or without you. This truth needs to sink in as you consider your contribution to the world around you. This doesn't mean that your offering doesn't have value. Actually, it's a reminder that you are only one person and you cannot save the world. If we want to participate in the ongoing work of compassion and care for each other, we need to take care of ourselves along the way. Let's talk about just a few ideas for how we can make this work more sustainable and avoid burnout and compassion fatigue. First, take care of your body. Feed yourself good food, get enough sleep, stay hydrated, and move your body in whatever way works for you. Go to those doctor's appointments. Make time for rest. Talk to a therapist. Second, stay informed without becoming consumed. There is no shortage of news and information available in our current age, and we can easily get so caught up in all the news coming at us all the time that we just can't handle it. It isn't helpful, and it will burn you out fast. Try instead to set limits around your media consumption. For example, I have 3 news sources that I check in with every day, and I don't check them after a certain time at night. I limit my social media use, and I'm pretty picky about who I follow. You are not a bad person for not being informed about everything all the time. You are human, and you can only process so much information. Third, find small ways that you can do good every day. Danielle Koch Balfour says, when any overwhelming feeling sinks in and it seems like we can affect little or no positive change, remember what's within your reach. Your loved ones, your neighbors, and the small ways you can make a difference. Being intentional about doing good where you're planted is an opportunity to water the seeds of change around you and watch them grow. Even when you don't feel like your reach is wide enough, you're needed right where you are. We need to release ourselves from the expectation that we fight for every cause at once. Instead, choose 1 or 2 that you're really passionate about and invest your time and resources there. Fourth, seek joy. Life is hard for others and for us. Take opportunities to experience and create joy whenever you can. Spend that time with friends and family, making stupid jokes and talking about nothing. Eat your favorite foods and spend time doing your favorite hobby. Celebrate the small wins and the small steps toward change. Think about what brings you joy and latch onto it. Joy sustains us, especially when life is threatening to overwhelm us. Fifth and finally, connect to a community. We are not meant to walk through life alone. We need other people if we're going to create real change. And we need to spend time with people who bring us joy, who we feel safe to be ourselves around, who get it. This is important for everyone, but especially for people with marginalized or minority identities. Find or create that circle of care for people who are like you, who experience the same injustices and prejudices you do. who you can hang out with and not have to explain or defend because they just get it. And if you're part of a dominant group, don't be offended if there are spaces that aren't for you. Most spaces are, so it's okay to sit a few out. Marginalized people need safe spaces to work through experiences that are unique to them. It's an act of love to have those spaces. We need to take care of ourselves because the work of the gospel, the work that Jesus calls us to, is a lifelong endeavor. The world needs you. Your community needs you. Your family and friends need you. This church needs you. The world needs empathy and compassion now more than ever. This is important stuff, and I hope that these last few weeks have given you some tools to use as you navigate the pain and suffering around you, as you seek to heal divisions and embrace the diversity of our communities. I hope these tools of empathy and compassion will make us a better church that loves each other well, just as God envisioned. Amen.